What have Bono, Mrs Brown's Boys and Apple CEO Tim Cook got in common? Karl Deeter is here. You know the answer to that question tonight.
Yeah, they were all part of the tranche of information that came out in what was called the Paradise Papers. This was a bunch of documents that were given to Süddeutsche Zeitung, which are a German newspaper, the same newspaper that got the Panama Papers last year, and it contains all sorts of information and documentation about various bank accounts, emails, ownership structures, and all of those names were mentioned in those papers.
Boil it down for us, Karl. Like, what were these institutions and people doing?
In many cases, so far as we can tell so far, it looks like they were doing legal things to reduce their tax bill. So you would see, for instance, someone do something where instead of doing it in the normal way that you or me might do, which is to buy something and then you're the owner of it and you pay your tax every year, that they might find ways to defer the tax or to reduce the tax bill. And really, it's just I'm kind of in two minds about it, because on one hand it's revealing some important stuff, but on the other hand, is it right to out someone who's doing something perfectly legal? Do you have the right to privacy? Or when you get to a certain level of wealth, do you lose that right? Certainly in Ireland, this is a country where we have a long and strong history of creating various structures that favour this kind of thing. We're actually seen as a tax haven by countries like Brazil. And then the third thing would be, is why do people use these structures? When government want to complain about it, do they have something to answer in terms of, are they creating taxation systems that are so onerous that people would rather leave than stay and pay those taxes? So,
but I suppose the question is, for many people watching here tonight, they're paying a marginal tax rate of 52%. But if you are uber wealthy, you've got stacks of cash, you can avail of these schemes and not pay that 52%. It just seems terribly unfair. It's not illegal, but it's unfair. That's how it would feel to many people.
Well, the wealthy in Ireland actually pay most of the tax. So, the top sort of 4 or 5% of taxpayers actually pay the rump of income tax that is collected in this country. But then what you see is people who are known as ultra wealth, and they would be, up in the tens, hundreds of millions plus. And they have an entirely different set of rules. And for them, they would hire the best lawyers, the best accountants, and they know how to set up these structures.
OK, well, here's the thing. And Bono said tonight that he's distressed the company he invested in may have avoided profit. From Mrs Brown's Boys, Patrick Houlihan said that he didn't fully understand the advice that he was given. Are we dealing here with situations where people are saying to advisors and tax consultants, take my money, go off and invest it, and they're not paying attention to what happens, or, as in Patrick Houlihan's case, they don't fully understand what they're doing?
Look, BBC had alleged that the Browns Boys team had routed more than €2 million over to Mauritius. That's what they had said had occurred. And what I would be saying is, if you're going to give someone €2 million and not really know what's happening, you probably...
Then you should know what's going on.
You've probably a few questions to ask about your own, what you're thinking, rather than what the tax advisor is telling you.
OK, but still, Bono says tonight he welcomes this reporting.
Well, I suppose once you're outed, you can't say otherwise. If he welcomed it, he could have disclosed it voluntarily. I mean, Bono has been in the press since 2006, where in a negative sense, because on one hand, looking for debt forgiveness for poor nations, and on the other, once Ireland removed the cap, or set a cap on the royalties you could earn tax-free, U2 had moved a lot of their affairs to the Netherlands, which treated their taxation situation better. Equally, a Maltese company was used to buy a shopping centre in Lithuania, and then that Maltese company was shifted over to the Channel Islands. Regular people don't do that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying that he in particular or anybody involved came up with that structure, that they were sitting there saying, yeah, do this, do this. And certainly in terms of the wealth of the likes of Bono or U2, this is a drop in the ocean. So I doubt it was a great big scheme. But still, they get caught up in this advice circle because there is an entire corporate machine, and this is what they churn out. They churn out tax avoidance. They churn out this grey area between different jurisdictions, and a lot of governments want us to stop.
And the bottom line is that the Irish Exchequer is at the loss, really, of this money when it originates in Ireland. What can government do about it if it's a legal scheme?
Well, government actually create most of the legal schemes that mean we don't get tax. If you look at things like the double Irish, that was tolerated for a very long time.
Well, that's interesting, because that involved Apple. as we know, a couple of years ago, and all of that was revealed, that the money was being routed through Ireland and it was stateless money, if you like, and so no tax was being paid on it, or very little.
And now Apple are moving everything to the Channel Islands because we no longer suit their purpose. So we're soiled goods, and now their stuff will move elsewhere. And that was also in the Paradise Papers.
So we saw that as well, that after that happened and the double Irish was revealed, and it was revealed that Apple was using that device, that they looked for somewhere else.
Yeah, and in fact, again, other news outlets had shown some of the documentation involved, and it was asking specific questions. Will we be able to do this, you know, under a veil of confidentiality? Do you expect there to be any political change that will perhaps alter this advice in the future? So they're looking for very forward-guided ideas of, if we do this, how long we get away with it is maybe not the best way to word it, but they want to know how long can we be confident that this structure will endure. And
do you expect that we'll hear more from these papers? They're only released last night.
Well, there's 13.5 million of them, and that's a lot of stuff to get through. And there's journalists from all over the world, and you know, it's big. In fact, only 2 days ago was the funeral of the Maltese journalist who was killed by a car bomb, and a lot of people say that it was intrinsically tied to the Panama Papers, which was a similar release last year. So I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's at play. This is not like, you know, fun and games. There are some seriously powerful people involved, seriously powerful people implicated, and I think it probably will run for a long time. And there'll be a lot of names in there that nobody knows, and yet they're equally the ultra wealth elite of the world who are avoiding the taxation of the jurisdictions they live in.
Karl Deeter, thank you very much indeed. To our next item, my question for you is, if you were called up to play for an Irish sports team, given that you weren't born here, would you do it?
Absolutely, but unfortunately for whatever team took me on, they'd be bound to lose.
Fair enough, fair enough. But who is Irish enough when it comes to sport and playing for Ireland?